What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. In lieu of a bio on this episode, I'm going to mention Alpha Male Podcast and Simple Man Sermons. If you don't listen to those and you just listen to Gunfighter Life, you may want to check those out. Alpha Male Podcast, because there's more to life than just guns. And Simple Man Sermons, if you care about the important stuff. Just did an episode on there, shouldn't be too far back in the feed, on Simple Man Sermons, on Christian warriors. A Bible study about use of force, violence, for the Christian. You might find that interesting. Anyway, with that, what are we going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life? We're going to talk about a good, solid battery of guns. Recently did an episode on most flexible guns. There will be some similarity, but not on everything, because you don't need the most versatile rifle if you have a battery. You don't need your rifle to be decent at home defense because you have a shotgun, right? And the shotgun is better. So the rifle doesn't need to do that. Right? Your handgun doesn't need to be great at hunting. Because although I love hunting with a handgun, I do it for the challenge. I do it for the challenge. If you have a rifle and a shotgun, if you're hunting with a handgun, things have gone terribly wrong unless you just want the challenge. So your handgun, unlike the most flexible episode, your handgun doesn't have to be decent for hunting because you're probably never going to hunt with it. Most people, even who hunt, never hunt with a handgun. So that's the caveat. But let's talk about a good, decent battery. Let's talk in order of firepower and work our way down. Let's talk about the rifle. And this is not the best battery for your militia or for your MAG, Mutual Assistance Group, if you have let Orwellian newspeak filtrate into you thinking some words are bad when they're not. But this is not the episode for that. This is a good, solid battery for if things continue as they are with, fairly high inflation, but not, Venezuelan inflation or Weimar Republic inflation, or if things go terribly, terribly wrong and our civilization collapses like the life cycle of empires might suggest. Either one of those cases would be a good, solid battery. Again, for fairly normal times, dealing with the just events of life, and if things go terribly wrong, for all manner of things. A good, solid battery. Let's talk about a rifle. I mentioned in the most versatile one, the 760. That will be a good one. That is a pump action center fire rifle. You can get it in 308 or 30-06. One of those two would probably be my choice for this. It's good for hunting in normal times. It's a great hunting rifle. It's called the Game Master. It's also got a reasonable rate of fire if you had to use it. It wouldn't be the best, like battlefield rifle at all. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're talking about home defense or most civilian defensive encounters, a shotgun is probably going to be your best bet for that. Unless you're planning on being a part of an armed resistance. For most situations, the 760 would probably get you out of a sticky situation with a couple of spare mags if you did your part. And also, they're pretty robust if you're talking about needing maintenance. Plenty of those kicking around from, the 60s that have probably had zero new parts put in them. They're fairly robust. They're fairly accurate, especially for a pump action rifle. They have a decent rate of fire. Not as good as a semi-auto, but pretty decent. It'd be a good one for this battery. Now, if you wanted to bifurcate, and I think there's some reasons to do this. If you wanted to bifurcate this and split it into two, your center fire rifles, then I would say I could see some real logic and reason in that for this. You might want a good defensive rifle. in which case you might want to go dual 308 because commonality of ammo, if something happens to the one rifle, you have the other. You could do a AR-10 or some kind of battle rifle in 308, an M1A, something like that. Are they great hunting rifles? No. But would they work for a hunting rifle? Yes, if you had, again, dual purpose. But if you're bifurcating it, have a good hunting rifle. Have a bolt-action 308, a Savage 110 or even a Savage Axis or a Ruger American bolt-action in 308. If you had to press it in as a, let's say fighting rifle, it's not great, but it's not the worst thing ever. But it's a good hunting rifle. People hunt with those all the time. It's a great choice, a good bolt-action 308 hunting rifle. And then if you wanted an actual legit battlefield type rifle, an AR-10, an M1A, a SCAR-17, if you've got the Cougarans for that, that would be a good dual-purpose rifle battery with those two center fire rifles. If you wanted an AR-15, I would not advise you get your bolt action in 223-5.56. I would advise you to get your hunting rifle in something better. You can shoot deer with a 5.56, sure, but if you were going to bifurcate that way, you'd probably end up with two different calibers. Get it in 30-06 or get it in 308. Unless you're talking about Yellowstone territory, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, or, parts of Canada, Alaska, you might gravitate in those situations to 30-06, but otherwise a 308 is probably going to do you fine, and it's a NATO caliber. It's got all those benefits for, again, if times get crazy, it's really common. If you live somewhere with really up-close, dense type environments and or that overlaps with a place where your ability to own a modern semi-auto fighting rifle has been infringed, then you may look at like a lever action 30-30 there's many different flavors of that, but that's a decent rate of fire as well, and the 30-30 is a good all-around round. Anyway, moving on from rifles. Shotguns, and this is pretty easy. Certainly, I think you want a shotgun. In fact, it'd be the first gun out of the entire battery that I would get. I would get a good 12-gauge shotgun. If you want a 20-gauge, that's fine. Just, cost of ammo and availability of ammo and different types of ammo, the 12-gauge makes the most sense. There's nothing wrong with a 20, especially if you have several smaller statured shooters or you just don't feel the need for a 12-gauge. But a good pump action or semi-auto, because you want reasonable rate of fire. If this is at all going to be a defensive thing, which again, I think for home defense, great choice. For most defensive encounters like a truck gun, it's a great choice. So I would want a pump or semi-auto. I've done a whole episode debating on different types of shotguns. You can get a good, decent pump shotgun for not a lot of money. A Maverick 88, a Mossberg 500, a Mossberg 835, especially if you wanted to shoot the 3.5-inch shells. You live in an area with a lot of waterfowl, goose hunting, duck hunting. That was going to be a major source of your calories or something you just enjoy doing. Nothing wrong with that gun. But a Mossberg 500 if you wanted to lean more towards the fighting side, a 590. And don't forget about the Benelli Nova. Those are all good choices. If you want a good semi-auto, not just a semi-auto that might work, like a good one, in my opinion, those cost you a little bit of money. I would go with a Benelli or a Beretta. If you're mostly going to be using it a lot for hunting, or it's going to be your main defensive choice, I see nothing wrong with that. A good Benelli, a good all-around one to have in your battery, a Benelli M2, or one of the Berettas. I prefer the Benelli inertia system for a lot of reasons, but if you're shooting high volume, there is something to be said for the better felt recoil for most people in the gas system. So like a Beretta 1301 or a Beretta A300 or something like that is a good choice as well. Obviously, the big advantage of the shotgun lies in the versatility of the ammo, so I'd make sure it was zeroed with whatever slugs I had, not just whatever slugs I bought at Walmart, but they shot point of aim, point of impact. I would have a good array of buckshot, and, whether you wanted to go double aught or number 1 or number 4. I've talked about that before too. But I'd have a good array of buckshot, I'd have a good array of birdshot, and any specialty loads that you wanted. Breaching rounds, less lethal rounds. That's, again, one of the good things about the shotgun is the versatility. But a good, probably pump action, 12 gauge. Great all-around gun, great for home defense, great truck gun, great for hunting. When people think hunting, they often think of deer and elk, but there's so much to be hunted. There's grouse and pheasants and quail and dove and, again, geese and all manner of other fowl. Can be a major source of calories, and especially good fat, which is hard to come by on a hunter-gatherer diet. And you can also hunt deer with it. There is nothing in North America that a 12 gauge with a proper slug will not handle. So the 12 gauge pump shotgun, just a good, easy thing, and certainly I think belongs in a battery, some kind of shotgun. Now, here's a small caveat. If you just are not interested in the shotgun for defense at all, it's not going to be your home defense gun. You've decided to bifurcate and have a good defensive rifle in your battery like an AR, and that's going to be your home defense gun, that's going to be your truck gun, and I still think you should have a shotgun. In that case, if you want just a single shot, break open shotgun, Boss, break open single shot, affordable, just get one of those and get the different array of ammo, because as cool as that AR is and as Instagrammy as it might be with all the cool accessories, it's not great for putting food on the table. It's not great for hunting ducks. It's not great for hunting turkey or plucking a dove out of the air. So I'd still have one if you wanted to get a single shot, even in that case, a single shot 20 gauge. But I would still have one. Now, let's talk about the handgun. And I guess if we're going down in order of magnitude, you might argue that the 12 gauge with the slug should have been first. But anyway, let's talk about centerfire handguns. I think any battery in North America, meaning like the U.S., not sadly Canada or maybe, well, I guess in other countries it may just depend on how much money you have, but a good centerfire handgun. A handgun, because it's a gun that you can have on you doing most things. Centerfire handgun. If you're just talking about one centerfire handgun, then go mid-size, because you can press it into service as a combat fighting handgun, and it'll do a lot better than like a pocket gun, like a pocket 380, right? That's not a good backup in a combat situation. It's maybe a good backup to a backup, like for a police officer, they have their carbine, then they have their full-size fighting handgun, and then maybe they've got a LCP in their spare handcuff case or their cummerbund or something. It's a backup to a backup. But if you're talking about one centerfire handgun, go mid-size, like a Glock 19 is probably the most common, or a M18, which is the compact version of the military's new handgun, or Smith & Wesson M&P Compact, or something like that, and in the mid-size range. Any of those would work for a backup tool to a combat loadout, and they're also good carry guns, better than the ultra-small compact carry guns, if you're actually willing to carry them. That said, a lot of people and a lot of times are not. So I'd want you to be armed all the time. If you're going to bifurcate this one and go into two categories for the centerfire handgun, I would have one really good full-size fighting handgun. Bump up to your M17, bump up to your, I would even say Glock 34, but at least a Glock 17, or, a full-size gun, a 1911, whether it's in 9mm or not, something full-size, a full-size fighting handgun. SIG 226, a Beretta M9 92, all great choices. Then I would have a very small gun for the situations where you're not going to carry that gun. Something, even if you're not into pocket carry, about the size that would fit into your pocket, however you want to carry it. If you wanted to keep it in 9mm, there's a lot of wisdom to that, to have the one caliber stockpiling ammo. Recently just recorded an episode on that. But if you wanted to keep it in 9mm, you're talking, Glock 43 or a Smith & Wesson Shield. If you consider that a pocket gun, it's marginal. A Beretta Nano, something like that. If you wanted to go 380, that opens up a lot of other doors. Or if you don't care about ammo commonality, there's a lot of advantages to a Smith & Wesson J-frame or similar, quality made, good, commonly referred to as snub-nose revolver. And then you've got your full-size fighting handgun, and you have your super small subcompact gun for your commonly referred to New York reload, or for your gun that you're just going to have when you're not going to carry a full-size fighting handgun, right? You're out in shorts and no shirt, something like that, and you still want to be concealed for those kind of situations. But a good, proven, reliable design in your handgun, whether you go one handgun, the mid-size, good, proven, reliable. Again, M18, Glock 19, Smith & Wesson M&P Compact, SIG 229, which is kind of their compact size. Any of those would be good. And the same thing with the full size. Beretta 92 M9, SIG 226, M17, Glock 34. You get the idea. Good, proven, reliable, either military proven, combat proven, law enforcement proven, one of those kind of things. Again, this doesn't have to be great for hunting. If you've exhausted all your rifles and all your shotgun and you're down to hunting with a handgun, you're probably just happy to be alive at that point. So, again, this is not the best crossover gun for all things, but a good, solid handgun or two handguns. You're going to really not find a lot of combat-proven, subcompact, micro-pocketable handguns, but just get one that's been out, if you know the rule that I generally have, for about 3 years and has a good, solid reputation. Now, let us talk about rimfire. I suggest you have at least a rimfire rifle, and I would encourage you to have both a rimfire rifle and handgun for a backup, for, in the case of the rifle, hunting small game, for training. Because here's the thing, the best battery, the most expensive, the finest guns in the world don't make any difference to you if you can't run them effectively. And that requires training. Dry fire is great, but there is a time for live fire, and there's a time when you might want to stockpile a bit of ammo. And for the average person with the average income, you're probably not stockpiling, hundreds of thousands of rounds or tens of thousands of rounds of centerfire rifle ammo or centerfire handgun ammo. You can much more easily stockpile. Let's say our number is 5,000 rounds, right? You can easily, most people, the average, U.S. median household income can stockpile 5,000 rounds of 22. So there's a good reason there. And it's great for teaching new shooters, which you shouldn't just be arming yourself. Hopefully you're taking on the responsibility of training other people and introducing them to shooting and getting them to be safe and effective with firearms. Passing that on. Blessings are meant to be shared. For all those reasons, and for small game hunting. Shotgun's great for small game hunting, but there are certain situations, certain game that I would hunt where I would rather have a 22. It's great for all that. It could be pressed into defense for if you had to. I wouldn't recommend it as a first or second or third, but it certainly will kill people. It's done it plenty of times in the past. So 22 long rifle, primarily in the rimfire, makes a lot of sense for that. For rifles, the Ruger 1022 is easy to recommend. In the most flexible episode, I talked about the ability to shoot different kinds of ammo with a lever action or a bolt action. They would be fine choices for this too, but if I'm just recommending one, a 1022 and configure it however you want to just keep it stock iron sights and use it to master the fundamentals of iron sight rifle shooting and marksmanship. You might go that route, maybe put a peep sight on it, but the Ruger 1022 is good, easy to recommend. If you want even more crossover, again, if you've got bolt actions and that's your primary and you want to run a bolt action 22, that's a fine choice too. Savage makes some decent ones. And if you're talking about a handgun, again, if you want to train handgun, you probably want one similar to whatever your primary fighting handgun is. Let's say you were getting a Glock 19 and that was going to be your one go-to centerfire. A Glock, I think it's the 44, their 22 long rifle. You might want to go that route. If it were me, I'd probably actually go with the Tactical Solutions conversion kit because I think they're probably much better. But either way, you get the idea. If you were going to go with an M&P, you might go with an M&P 22, but you get the idea there. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but fairly similar. And if you had to, again, it wouldn't be my first choice for defense, but if something happened, you lost, you got stolen, got confiscated, whatever it is to your primary handgun, you would have a handgun. So you could be armed when you wouldn't normally be carrying a long gun. So again, not recommending a 22 for self-defense. I'm not saying it's a better choice than a centerfire. I'm saying if you had a 22 handgun, not only could you practice with it, not only could you train with it, it would also be a backup if something happened to your primary handgun. I think that's a pretty good, well-rounded battery. A thought occurred to me when I was thinking about this. If you're the kind of guy that's all about the battle rifle, either the AR-15 or the 308 type battle rifles, and that's your main thing and you love that, and that's mostly what you're going to focus on, and you know that about yourself, right? That's just what you care about. It's what you're passionate about. You're going to have several of those because that's just what you love. I would still encourage you to get some variety. There was a time when they made break-open single shots, and I forget if they were the H.R. Handy rifle or the Rossi or both, but they made like matched sets that came with, I think, 243, 22, and a shotgun of some gauge, whether it was 410 or 20 gauge or 12 gauge or multiple of those, I don't know. But that would be a great thing to add if you're all about the combat rifles and the combat handguns. So you have, several combat handguns, you have several fighting rifles, but you don't really have anything else. That would be a good thing, inexpensive to add, because it would cover a lot of bases. It doesn't have a reasonable rate of fire. It's single shot, but even that single shot 243 is probably going to be a better hunting rifle for you. As much as you love your AR, I hate to tell you. Can you shoot a deer with an AR? Yeah. I've killed deer with a snub nose. Doesn't make it good for it, right? Doesn't make it the best tool for the job if I'm trying to eat that day. The 243 with a decent scope, even single shot, I think is better. So there's that. You also get the shotgun, because again, as much as you love the AR, shooting a dove out of the air is not something the AR is very good at. Even if you had the skill to do it, the whole point of shooting it is to have meat to eat, right? Unless you're some kind of psychopath that just takes pleasure in just shooting doves for no reason. But if you're shooting it to eat it, you don't want a high velocity 22 round, right? It's going to destroy a lot. That's not the goal. A shotgun is going to do far better at that. Even a single shot 20 gauge. So you might look at one of those combos if that's you, if you're the tactical guy, and this is a guy that likes tactical guns that's talking to you. I just am sober enough to realize they're not the best for everything. So one of those combos, if you can find it, whether it's, whatever they came in, but 243, 308, especially if you already have 308, but a break open single shot, you can interchange your barrels between, let's say, 243, 22 long rifle, and a 20 gauge shotgun. That would be a phenomenal add-on if you already have a bunch of tactical guns to have a decent battery. It's not the best, but it would work. And if you know that's you and you just want to check the box to have something, let's say you've got all these tactical guns, but you know what? There's a bunch of ducks around and you're hungry and you want to go take ducks. Anyway, just some thoughts on a good, solid battery. Not the most budget battery, not the cheapest way I could check all the boxes, but a good, solid battery, I think. And you may have your own things. You may decide you really like a certain gun, so that takes a certain place in your battery. You may really love and be into World War II history, so maybe an M1 Garand for you. That's going to be like your one go-to rifle. And I'd say that's not the worst choice ever, for sure. I don't think that I'm telling you you have to have this battery. I'm not. I'm saying this would be a good, solid battery. And you should have some kind of battery, even if you don't have it yet. Unless you're just the guy that shoots AR in competition, and that's all you care about, right? You're not a survivalist, you're not a prepper, you don't think the economy could tank, you don't think things could get bad, you don't think there could ever be civil strife or unrest, and you just want to shoot ARs in competition, then competition ARs is probably all that you're interested in. But if you're interested in a well-rounded, good, solid battery, hopefully you found this helpful. Anyway, with that, thanks for listening. Tactical tip of the day. I have no affiliation with this company or anything, but recently in the Patreon chat it came up about buying ammo and how expensive it is. And I likened it to this. If you buy your ammo a box at a time at your local gun store, that's kind of like buying, I view it as kind of like buying your paper towels at Whole Foods. You can in a pinch if you're in a hurry and you need paper towels, but you're going to spend far more for probably a similar product than if you did it and bought it more wisely somewhere else. If you're looking to buy ammo, and again, no affiliation, but AmmoSeek, it's kind of like a search engine like Expedia or, Travelocity or whatever it is, but for buying ammo. You type in what you want. I want 9mm. You can even get more specific. I want 9mm, 147 grain. And it will search the internet, and it's pretty good about stuff that's actually there and in stock if you're trying to find ammo. Instead of maybe that next gun, if you don't have a stockpile of ammo, you might consider going to AmmoSeek and saving up instead of buying that next gun. If you already have a decent 9mm handgun, buying a 1,000-round case of 9mm. Anyway, AmmoSeek, I have used it before, but it has been a while, so it's a good tactical tip. Your tactical verse of the day. Joshua chapter 1. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide an inheritance in the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.